Jumbo.
Jumbo.
Welcome, welcome. We are so glad that you're joining us. This is Black Power Media Reloaded, and the program that you are listening to and watching is called Operation Power.
Power.
And we come to you each Thursday at this time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we invite you to make us a regular feature of what it is that you listen to and what you watch. And we pray that you would be able to send the word to your friends as well as to what it is that you saw, what you heard, and what you experienced on Operation Power. I'm your co-host. My name is Inez Barron, and I'm here along with my husband, the bold, the outspoken, the indomitable, the one, the only, the fearless, the outspoken, the unbought, and unbossed.
Charles Barron, and I always say each and every week, the humble servant. And it is indeed an honor to be next to the love of my life, my wife of 43 years. The stunningly beautiful,
thank you,
the intellectually brilliant, bold bad, Inez Barron.
Thank you so much. Once again, you are listening and watching Operation Power. We've got an exciting topic for you today.
Yes, we do.
And it's called the 4th of July, not July, the 4th of July, and the real deal about Juneteenth. We've got two fascinating guests, well-versed in the topic. We have Dr. Melina Abdullah, and we have Professor James Small, and they'll be joining us shortly. But we do want to start our program with a libation. We understand that we've come to this part of our journey and our liberation struggle based on the work of those, the sacrifice of those, the work, the commitment, the sacrifice, and the dedication of those who've gone before us, our ancestors. In the African tradition, we believe that we should honor them and invite them to be a part of this ceremony. And we do have a libation video that we're going to share with you at this time. Kiru Gachuru is our engineer.
So for this very important presentation, we begin by the pouring of libation. We pour libation first to our first ancestor, to that hidden one who, though hidden, manifests in all things as all things, that God-goddess idea in the universe by any and all names. To our first ancestor, we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the first people on this planet, mothers and fathers of all mankind, flashpoint of the human family. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the ones who first gave birth to the idea of civilization, knew we would need a form of governance, and they nurtured that idea along the Nile until it reached its zenith in Kemet. There they built these gigantic monuments as evidence of that great civilization, and they carved instructions on the walls of temples and tombs for us, so we would never forget. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because over time they put together all the tenets of civilization, and they took those ideas and left the continent. They were the people of the first Exodus. They left Africa and went all over the world and peopled the world. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they did not sit on their laurels. They continued to improve, continued to evolve, and at each point of evolution, they again would leave the continent and settle and resettle the planet. They met themselves coming and going. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time, they found themselves the object of a forced exodus when they were kidnapped, shackled, cargoed, shipped out of Africa and enslaved in diasporas around the world. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to the ancestors left at home, the very young, the aged, the infirm, left to reinvent themselves, depleted of us, human resources. But they were enjoined by us in the diasporas, both objects of a global myopia that ruptured the soul of a people as it ravaged a continent. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time they began to remember who and what they were. Because no matter where they had been dropped off, They still retained bits and pieces of who and what they were. They retained that African core that described them. They began to remember bits and pieces of a song. They began to remember lines from a rhythm. They began to remember dances that they did in ancient times. They began to remember those ancient drum beats that they now beat out on bare skin. And so to those ancestors, we pour libation. Ashe. Pour libation too to them, because they then began to teach each other. They began to resurrect and reconstruct that history and that culture. They became the new Africans wherever they were. They became the new teachers, preachers, archaeologists, the new singers, dancers, the new drummers, the new Jaliyah. They reconstructed that history and our culture and became new Africans everywhere. So to those ancestors, we pour libation. Ashe.
Asheo.
Aseo.
Thank you so much. Once again, this is Operation Power, a voice for Black radical politics and revolutionary change. And just to give you a little bit more about Operation Power, we do have another short video that we're going to share with you, which talks about who we are, how we got started, and what some of our accomplishments are.
Operation Power stands for people organizing and working for empowerment and respect.
Operation Power is a grassroots social justice organization founded by local community stakeholders, which includes activists, organizers, and leaders who understand that the system as it is currently structured is destroying us and our communities.
The system, the capitalist system, one that promotes human greed over human need, one that promotes profit over people, needs to be dismantled. These local community organizers recognize capitalism needs to be destroyed and replaced with socialism.
Operation Power was founded in 1997 with the understanding that uprooting capitalism needs to begin locally. Operation Power understood that our communities are the perfect vehicle to dismantle this parasitic capitalist system brick by brick, and the economic, political, and cultural institutions and other systems in place in our local community infrastructure. Whether it's the local school board, community board, city council, state assembly, all represents mechanisms to control the destiny of our people.
Thank you so much. There are several books we want to highlight. The first one that we want to highlight is called Speaking Truth to Power. The author is none other than Charles Barron, and it is a compilation of articles and essays and speeches that have been given over a number of years. And we do invite you to get a copy. You can get it online at Barnes & Nobles. The second book is called It's Not You, It's Capitalism: Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On. And the author is a dear friend of ours, Malika Jabali, Esquire. And we do invite you to get that book also. The next book is, in fact, a novel. It is called Black Rising. The author is Kevin Barron. It is a page turner. Once you start, you won't put it down until you finish. The second book in the series, the trilogy by Kevin Powell, is called Black Rising. Kevin Barron. It's called Black Rising, Home and Abroad. And the third book in the trilogy is called The Threat. And it's a continuation of the theme that was presented in the first book. All of these books are available online at Barnes & Noble, and we do invite you to get them. We're here today with an exciting program.
Yes, indeed.
The 4th of July, and the real deal about Juneteenth. Now, we know America is all up waving flags and whatever for the 250th anniversary of the founding of this land that they stole and took over and kidnapped us and brought us here to work it and to develop it. So we're going to look at this 4th of July. We've got two exciting guests. We're going to ask if our Professor James Small is available. If you can bring him up, Charles.
Yes,
There he
ma'am.
is.
I'm available.
Our favorite professor.
Good.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about the 4th of July. And the reason why we say that, because the two biggest lies in America is one, that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. He did not. He didn't free anybody. Matter of fact, the only thing he wanted to do was to get us out of bondage and send us back to Africa so America can be purely white. And then the second, of course, is Juneteenth. We were not sitting around wondering when the enslaved master was going to let us free because the Emancipation Proclamation freed us. It did not. So we're going to explode those myths and talk more about that. And just for a side note, two of the most terrorist, imperialistic, brutal countries, nations in the world are the youngest. 250 years for America, 78 years for Israel. And these two terrorist states are creating havoc across the country. And they attacking countries like Iran and been around thousands of years. Other countries that they competing against China, thousands of years. And here just 250 years. So we're glad that people, or we hoping people will not support the 4th of July, because while Betsy Ross was stitching that American flag, we were catching stitches in slavery. So we have our professor here to talk to us a bit about that, and we're waiting on our second guest. Hopefully she'll be on. Oh, there she is. There's Dr. Melina Abdullah. So we have both of our guests here.
I'm finally meeting you in the face. I've seen you in the newspapers. I've heard all over the internet. So it's good to see you.
It's an honor to meet you. An honor to meet you.
So, Inez, you're gonna.
Yes, we're so glad that we have our second guest joining us, Dr. Melina Abdullah, who is the co-founder of Black Lives Matter's grassroots organization. She's been our guest, as has Dr. Jane, as has Professor Small, and we're so pleased that you both have agreed to be here and enlighten us and move us further as we discuss this topic. And we know that there's a famous speech that Frederick Douglass gave, where he talked about that. And a lot of people just know a little snippet of it, but it is an extensive speech. I think it took an hour for him to deliver the entire speech. And I do invite people to go and check it out. It's very enlightening. It talks about so many aspects. But we're going to start first with you, Dr. Melina Abdullah, and we're going to invite you to make any opening comments and to get to our topic as well.
Sure. So it's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to be with you, Professor Small, as well. This is one of my favorite places to be. So thank you so much for inviting me. I don't know if you know that when I was invited, that my family actually hails from Beaumont, Texas, which is right up the road from Galveston.
Right up the road.
Wow. And so I grew up, I'm one of the people act like this is something we've been doing, and all across the country, we've always celebrated Juneteenth. I'm seasoned, but I'm not that old. I'm 53. And I've celebrated Juneteenth all my life. But until about, 15 years ago, it was something that Black Texans especially celebrated. And even growing up here in California, most Black folks did not celebrate Juneteenth. So they were very small celebrations that we had because we were from Beaumont, right? In my grandparents' backyard, and we'd have red soda and eat watermelon and play dominoes. And it was really kind of a small family gathering. And so this subject is really personal to me because I feel, and I'm just going to move based on how I feel angry. And so every time people talk about it's a federal holiday, I feel salty because there's a whole bunch that we need to talk about. So first of all, it wasn't all Black folks that were celebrating Juneteenth, but also the audacity that it's a federal holiday and that white folks, the descendants of slavers, get the day off. is absolutely ridiculous to me. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And then also the perspective that Joe Biden, who is not, I know we try to pretend like, or they try to pretend like he's a friend to Black people. He has never been a friend to Black people.
Never.
And it's important that we remember he has no authority to grant a holiday, which we already took for ourselves. And when we talk about emancipation, we were already emancipating ourselves. And if you read the Emancipation Proclamation and Field Order number 3, it's also important to remember that when General Granger came riding in on the white horse to Galveston, he did not even say that he believed, it was not conveyed that slavery was over. What he said was, what that field order reads, is that you are to remain quietly in your present home and work for wages. And so we should be thanking our ancestors, those from whose bloodlines we inherit, for freeing Black people from slavery. There was no General Granger or Abraham Lincoln or Joe Biden that freed us. We freed ourselves.
That's right. Dr. Small?
Thank you, sister. Thank you. You're on it. See, me and you, we can hang together. Yes, I'm following my sister. You know, I grew up in South Carolina, Georgetown, right down there by Charleston. And we used to celebrate Emancipation Day on the 1st of the year. We actually had a parade when I was a child. We'd always have these parades. I don't think they do it anymore. They do it in Charleston, but not down in Georgetown, where I'm from. I'm from like the rice mill, you know, the marshland. But I didn't learn about Juneteenth until maybe 25 years or so ago, a little more than that. And like Sister saying, the place where it was celebrated was in Texas. Very few other people around the country, except those who were from Texas, even knew of the phenomena of a Juneteenth. And then it began to grow as people moved around the country, and then Black folks were looking for things to hang their hat on, really. And that was one of the consistent things, because I go to Galveston every year. I helped to start the tribute to the ancestors. I think this is our 25th or 26th year coming up. And so I got to be with the brothers and sisters that live in Galveston, born and raised there, parents born and raised there, and hear the story of Galveston and the people. But the one thing I know through studying history, thousands of us had escaped before any Granger got there. We went on over to Mexico, because Guerrero, who was the first Black president of Mexico, who America helped to assassinate, by the way, had went through a gradual process of first abolishing the slave trade, and then 2 years later, abolishing slavery completely. And that's where we come to my 2 childhood heroes. When I was a little boy, you know, I had me a Bowie knife.
That's right.
And a little raccoon hat for Davy Crocker. Then I found out these suckers were enslavers. And that whole battle at the Alamo had to do with white people taking a stance with wanting to bring enslaved Africans into Texas when Texas was a part of Mexico, and Mexico said, we've abolished slavery and we've abolished the slave trade. And initially, they had kind of given them a play, but a year later, they said, no. The final decree from Mexico said slavery is ended in all places with no exceptions. So this whole thing, when you see the wars that take place between Mexico with General Santillana, who when I was a child was my enemy, now I pray and ask my brother forgiveness because I know he was my friend and he was a liberator for Black people. And so we have to relearn history. And I think it was in 1845, there was about an estimate 30,000 of us living in Texas. But when people thought that Texas was going to be, remember, Texas was a free republic. So they said, we can have slavery here. We don't care about these other people. By 1850, that jumped to 58,000. By 1860, it was nearly 200,000.
That's right.
Carried there from other southern states because they thought that's where they could make their stance and have their free slave republic. And so we need to take these things into historical account and understand this was just being in Texas was an anti-African, pro-enslavement, pro-genocide conspiracy on the part of a bunch of rich farmers. And the American government was backing them. And so we just need to understand Texas was unusual, and that we need to understand that was Mexico up until a few years before the Civil War.
That's right.
And the sister was saying, you know, I remember seeing the movie Glory, and, you know, everybody loved Denzel. You got to love Denzel, right? And it's fantastic. But by the time they came up with Glory, hundreds of thousands of us had already picked up the guns. We didn't wait for them to create no unit up in Massachusetts. We were fighting from one end of this country, burning fields from one end of this country, freeing our damn selves.
That's right.
You know? Matter of fact, I was looking up how many of the towns that they would call Africa towns, they used to call them freedom colonies back in the day. And I think it was something like about 557 that was on record between 1865 and 1930. These free, separate Black communities, not the one where we integrated with them in the cities, separate Black communities, because they tell us only about the one in Oklahoma. That was just one.
That's right.
Down, but they burnt down and drove us out of hundreds of others. And that story is very important because long before any Emancipation Proclamation as a war document was passed, we had freed ourselves by the hundreds of thousands. They estimate that in the South, there was close to 300,000 Blacks already freed before the emancipation. We're not counting those who made it to the North and ran away, but we counted the ones in the Maroon community, the Bushes, because we don't call them Maroon community. But the forest in Virginia was nearly a 300-year-old Maroon community. I know in South Carolina near Myrtle Beach, that was called today we still call it, you know, they used to call it the free, they call us the N word, you know, the Freewood Negro, all these Negroes. But it's still called the Freewood today. It's Burgess, South Carolina, borders on Conway, Myrtle Beach, and Georgetown. But that space in there, hundreds of miles, Burgess, that was the Freewoods, you know, and we hear them all over America.
That's right.
And they did not come up in there. It wasn't until after the 60s that they started coming up in some of these communities when they started to run freeways through them.
Right.
Oh, man. See, this is why we wanted y'all on, so we can get some real truth up in here.
And Galveston, let me tell you one thing about Galveston, though. Those people didn't give a damn what the Black folks didn't give a damn what Granger had to say. Because he was saying, you stay right there and be slaves, and then we determine what your salary is going to be, which in most cases is no salary. And if you leave the plantation, it was Texas that invented the vagrancy law. That's the first time the Vagrancy Act was used. If we weren't on that plantation, we were charged with vagrancy, arrested, then the government rented us out to the enslavers. You know, so we need to just get the details. The details is nice. Let you see what it is.
Dr. Molina, the Confiscation Act, when they said that we're going to take the Confederate land, a lot of people didn't realize that Lincoln wasn't trying to free any slaves. It was about 11 slave states that left the Union.
That's right.
He said that you are free. Well, he didn't have no jurisdiction over them because the Jefferson Davis and the Confederacy was that. And there were 4 states that were slave states that stayed with the Union. He said you can keep yours.
That's
so
right.
That's the contradiction
New Jersey, Maryland, Kentucky.
Right.
All the border states were allowed to maintain slavery.
That's right.
It was only the states that were part of the Confederate States, which it's like issuing an Emancipation Proclamation for Mexico. They were not part of the Union. So it was very insincere. And one of the things that happens is, and this is why I think they try to dumb us down. And Professor Small, I really appreciate all your work in the area of ethnic studies. One of the reasons they see ethnic studies and Black studies specifically as such a threat is because we teach this, right? We teach that they've never given us anything. We teach, like, we can read Lincoln's words. Lincoln himself said, if I could maintain the Union without freeing a single slave, I would, but I can't. And so that's why the Emancipation Proclamation was disingenuous in the first place, because if he really felt like it was terrible, then the border states that actually did have, where he did have control, Maryland and all of those other border states, Kentucky and Virginia and they would have been freed as well. But he set his sights on Mississippi and Texas, and the Confederate states that he had no power over. What is, I think, important, so I just wrote a piece. I'm very fortunate that I get to write a column in the LA Sentinel every week. And last week I was in Collin County, Texas, for the trial where our young brother, our collective son, Carmelo Anthony, was unjustly convicted in a stand your ground gun rights state, right, of defending himself. And he was forced to defend himself against these white attackers who were jumping him. So I want to be very clear about what it was. He was being jumped by white supremacist bullies, and he pulled out not a knife, but a multi-tool that was often used to clean the cleats of track runners, right? And he defended himself, and he was set up because this judge, right-wing Republican judge, the DA, right-wing Republican DA with a whole history. He's probably in the Epstein files if he could make it. He would be an Epstein-er if he could get on the list to be one, but he wasn't that sophisticated. So he just did little Epstein stuff in his little town, right? But no Black people on the jury, right? No cameras around allowed in the courtroom. Gag order on the family, so the family couldn't even say who this child was, that he was a 3.8 GPA, captain of both the football and track team, right? And worked 2 jobs. And from one of those families, not that you have to be a perfect child or a perfect family to be worth your life and worth justice.
That's right.
But they were, intact family, 4 kids, in love forever. Father worked hard. Mother is a stay-at-home mom. Everything, like if you were to say, what is the new Huxtables, if Bill Cosby didn't have those issues, this was them, right? So I was in Collin County, Texas, but as we were in the parking lot praying for Carmelo Anthony, organizing for Carmelo Anthony, the white supremacists were on the other side of the parking lot. And they were driving through our area, making monkey noises, saying things like Carmelo should be hung from a tree. They were a literal lynch mob. And so the ruling that came down, the verdict that was issued, but also the 35 years that this child has been sentenced to and is now in prison for, it's not, I think, coincidental that it happened in the state of Texas. And we have to remember that Texas never became free because Texas decided to become free. Black Texans became as free as we could because we took our own freedom. And I'll be quiet after I say this.
No, go ahead.
My family's from Beaumont. My grandfather owned the pharmacy in Beaumont, in Black Beaumont, because it was, when my mother was growing up, it was, divided. It's still divided, but it was literally train tracks. I didn't know white people even lived in Beaumont until like a year ago. I was like, wait, there's white people in Beaumont. Well, no, when they opened the Olive Garden, that's when I realized white people were and so my mom always tells the story of how what white folks in the area saw as rebellion was Juneteenth, because in Beaumont, they would be very clear about themselves as being free Black people. And so there was always a Juneteenth parade that Black people would engage in. And it was our parade. We didn't need a permit. We didn't ask for any permission to do it. Black folks would do this Juneteenth parade every year to reaffirm who we are as free Black people. And my mom always tells the story of my grandfather trying to leave the pharmacy and him putting my grandmother, having to put my grandmother, who was browner than my grandfather was, on the floorboards. My grandmother and my uncle would have to be on the floorboards. They had to lay down on the floorboards because the Ku Klux Klan had come in to shoot up the Juneteenth parade. And he had to get his young family out of that space. So I'm saying all of that to say that just like we did in June 19th, 1865, just like we had to do in the 1940s, we still have to do now in Texas and everywhere. It's Black people taking our own freedom and not waiting on the issuance of a federal holiday from Joe Biden or a field order from General Granger.
Powerful, powerful piece. Dr. Small, the 13th Amendment, some of us say that slavery was never abolished. The 13th Amendment says slavery shall be abolished except as a punishment for crime. And a lot of people don't realize that when they were debating the 13th Amendment, it was actually a slaveholder, Senator Henderson from Missouri, who wrote the language of the 13th Amendment. And one of the radical Republicans, Charles Sumner, he was saying, slavery shall be abolished everywhere, and enslaved Africans should get equal protection under the law, not except as a punishment. And at the same time they were debating that, they were building the first state penitentiaries, like in 1780 and 1760, the first state penitentiaries. Prior to that, it was the chain gang and all of the kinds of stuff. So talk a bit about that, how we went from the plantation to the penitentiary.
Okay, but first let's remember that they beat Sumner down. I think the man never gained his health.
Literally.
Beat him up with sticks right there in Congress.
That's right.
And I don't think he ever regained his health. So people know they were that vicious to one of their own, not just in public, in the Congress.
Oh, that's right.
But when they said when the 13th Amendment says that slavery is ended except for those who commit a felony, and the Southerner who wrote it, they were very clear, because immediately following this, everything we did was criminalized. Mm-hmm. They came up with what they called the Black Codes.
That's right.
A set of rules describing things that were felonies and crimes that would be normal for anybody else, but Black folks doing them were crimes. And so we were put right back into the penal system. But now it was a dual system. The state then leased us back to the chain gang. I had family members. My daddy was on the chain gang for a minute. Grandpa was on the chain gang for a little bit more than a minute because he had shot somebody. So we know what the prison system is like. I spent during the 60s 3 or 4 times on the lockup for movement things. So we know that the whole penal system in America was designed to capture the runaways. Mm-hmm. It was expanded after the Civil War, so-called, to then facilitate the capture of the free African whose rights are being taken away by the so-called Black Codes, which is written immediately after the 13th Amendment, saying that slavery is ended except for those that commit certain felonies. And then they describe multiple things that was normal for anyone to do as being felonies, and we were caught up in the midst of that, and that's not withstanding the Granger's order of staying in place. Almost everywhere that order stood, and that's how we end up on these lands being sharecroppers.
Right.
Never got paid for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Debt slavery in the most sophisticated way. You never got out of debt, so you could never leave the land. Your debt was always greater at the end of the year than whatever you were able to produce. And so the perpetuation of slavery.
That's right.
I don't even like that term, Jim Crow. I never liked it. I don't like it now. It's meaningless in terms of describing the genocide that we had to go through.
That's right. Dr. Molina, convict leasing. There was a time where, they didn't have the state penitentiaries and everything was about corporations being in the courtroom when you got busted for the vagrant laws and all of these laws that they created, the Black Codes. They would then say, if you can't pay the fine, we will, the corporation. And now they would lease these enslaved Africans to these corporations and they'll be in it forever. Talk a bit about that.
Well, that's not too different now, right?
How-
When we talk about what's happening now with, I was going to say enslaved people, then say, oh, wait, no, I'm wrong. But I am right. They are enslaved people.
That's right.
When we think about what's happening, as Dr. Small was just offering, right, there's an exception for the 13th Amendment. There's an exception. When we talk about what happens, the role of Victoria's Secret, the role of every major airline, in using imprisoned people for their labor source and paying very, very little, very, very little, with the majority of the payment going to the states that dare to hold them. That is a continuation of convict leasing. And in fact, in many ways, it's worse because the states are even paying for the housing and food while the corporations are exploiting the labor and profiting from the labor. So there are a few states, California we tried to bar it, but there's a few states, I believe Vermont is one of the states, one of the very few states that bans private corporations from paying sub-minimum wage to imprisoned folks. But in California, you think liberal California, we tried to pass legislation saying that they at least had to be paid minimum wage. And we failed. We tried to pass legislation that says they have to be paid minimum wage and they cannot be enslaved, because also when we talk about slavery, we're talking about dehumanization of people. That's what separates chattel slavery from other forms of slavery around the world, is that people are treated as property. And we failed to pass that legislation. It has not happened in the state of California. We've made only a modest step forward last legislative cycle. And I'm sure you were watching this as legislators. There's a brother here named Isaac Bryan, who in the aftermath of the terrible fires that devastated Altadena, especially in Black communities, especially, he was able to pass legislation that says at least imprisoned firefighters have to be paid minimum wage. And that's the only thing we've been able to get through.
It's a horror story as we talk about the convict leasing. And we had an example of that here in Brooklyn. One of the former borough presidents in Brooklyn, he used to have these concerts in the summertime designed for Black people, because those were the artists that he would have them come in. They were free concerts. And it was determined after about the third year that he was doing, wait a minute, he's using inmates from prisons to come and set up the chairs. There was a outcry against it. People organized and boycotted and put the spotlight on him and forced him to stop doing that and to hire young people in the community and pay them that minimum wage to be able to do that. And another problem that we're seeing with this penal system is this privatization of these institutions, where the state rather, no longer is involved in that, but is passing off that responsibilities to these private corporations, and they are making excessive profit, again, as we talk about them not having any minimum standards for payments.
And by the way, Dr. Small, that borough president was Marty Markowitz, that clown that always goes around.
I remember.
Marty Markowitz, he had the nerve to do that. Dr. Small, they about so-called abolished slavery in New York in 1827. And New York City was the largest slaveholding state in the country, second to Charleston, South Carolina. But after they so-called abolished it, then in 1855, they started the NYPD, slave catchers, the New York City Police Department. Talk a bit about that.
I don't know the details about the department. I mean, because all police departments evolved in that way across the country. But what I do know about New York is that it became the manufacturing hub for slave produce, from rice to indigo to cotton to textile, you name it. New York was one of the biggest profiteers in the enslaving system in the U.S. And the Rockefeller family and the Chase Manhattan Bank
Mm.
they came into being in a deal cut with the Rothschild, who trained the guys who initially became Chase and hooked up with the Morgans out of Philadelphia to produce the steel in England, and the banks over here would buy it for the government to produce the railway to move the damn cotton. So to watch how they were, and these are the people who runs the New York City government. Okay, they may have, you know, little workers get elected to office, but they don't run nothing. The government is run by the banking system and the investment housing and the trade unions, and those were the elements that profited the most from slavery. Even somebody wrote a book on it too, and it's somewhere there on the shelf. But even up to the Civil War, the North was still fully supporting the Confederacy. Matter of fact, New York wanted to become a part of the Confederacy.
Wow.
You know, that was a real discussion because of the loss of funds they saw coming to them with the abolition of chattel slavery, as it were. And that's why you get the Hayes Compromise.
That's right.
It would be Hayes. They would let Hayes be the president, so the Northern business people can structure a new relationship with the agricultural South. And if they give the North that, the North would then give them back the institution by pulling the troops out.
Oh, that's right.
Ending that era. So that was a real deal they made. The Klan was already set to be in place. The Klan was nothing but the Confederate Army in a new uniform. You know, they took off the gray and they put on the white. That was the Confederate. It was led by Confederate generals. Bedford Forrest wasn't the only general leading the Ku Klux Klan. And the federal government and the Northern businessmen were all a part of this arrangement.
Wow. You know? Dr. Molina, in New York State, when we were in the state assembly, we weren't asking for no Juneteenth holiday. We were asking for reparations.
That's right.
We were pushing reparations. Here comes Governor Cuomo saying, I want to give y'all Juneteenth. So we ain't asking for Juneteenth because, first of all, it's a lie. That didn't happen, didn't go down like that anyway. We wanted reparations. I find now that a lot of the reparations movements across the country are being co-opted by the state, and then them having reluctant governors to even pay out the reparations compensation even after the work is done, particularly in California. Could you speak on that a bit?
Yeah. So I always say, and it gets me in trouble every Juneteenth, that for Black people, this is our Freedom Day. I do celebrate Juneteenth. I'm gonna be I don't eat chicken, but I eat fried chicken skin. I'm gonna be eating the fried chicken skin. I think I'm still a vegetarian if I only eat the skin. And so, you know, I'm gonna be eating some fried chicken skin and drinking red soda and eating some watermelon tomorrow. And I'm definitely gonna be on a Domino's table. And here's how I get myself in trouble is white folks, you can't come. You cannot come. You are not invited to this cookout. We do not want your raisin laden potato salad. Do not come. If you want to honor our freedom, then pay us reparations. That's what white people can do. Pay us reparations. We never asked Joe Biden to give a holiday. Maybe one person did, but the rest of us did not. We don't need you to give us something we already took for ourselves. We don't need you to give us a holiday. And then you're giving the enslaver the holiday off too. That doesn't make any sense. We don't need you to do that. What you need to do is give us reparations, and we demand reparations. I thought the point that Dr. Small was making was so important too, that as we demand reparations, it's reparations beyond the government, because Chase Bank, you know, made their profit. Where did their profits come from?
All came from
farm. Where did farmers? Why is farm in the name of every insurance company? Because the first policies that they issued were on our ancestors. It was insuring enslavers for the possible runaway or death of those they dared to call themselves.
We were commodities.
Right. We were commodities. And so Juneteenth is something we can do I think we do need spaces of jubilation, but that's for us. That's for my grandpa's backyard. That's for, whatever we decide to do. What the system needs to do, what white folks need to do. And I even tell individual white folks when they say, well, I do believe in reparations. I tell them, well, then pay it. You can pay it. Nothing's stopping you from paying it. You can pay reparations. Why don't you donate to a Black freedom organization? Why don't you, pay your neighbor's rent? Pay your neighbor's rent. So tomorrow should be reparations day, or a day to pay reparations for white people.
Listen, I have to give Dr. Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party credit. They have a white support group, and with Penny Hessen, they go all across the country and say, we are paying reparations to the African People's Socialist Party. And they're getting them to actually pay that reparations. People going to celebrate Juneteenth, but we should tell the truth about Juneteenth. We weren't sitting in some enslaved plantation in Galveston, dumbfounded, not realizing we were free.
Right.
We never were free. And
I want to comment on that.
Go ahead.
For a sister, because in the beginning, I didn't celebrate Juneteenth because I thought people were trying to make up some stuff. But after I started going to Galveston and listening to the Galvestonians and listening to the history of those people there in Texas, and realized they made that declaration for themselves, not the army, and they began this in 1865 for themselves. And they split out, and they found, when they tell them to stay on these plantations, some people say, yo, you stay there.
They
Most
did
people
not.
went the hell out, grab themselves an acre or two of land and start planting. And opening Africa Town, multiple communities, which they name Africa Town, so their memory was still very much intact. And so since this was our thing, I began to say, then it's worth celebrating, and then bringing the history in, Charles, that they didn't give us nothing. Granger didn't come there. He came to and make the Union for Lincoln intact. The holdout was Texas. And as long as Texas was holding out, the Confederacy wasn't defeated. Despite Maddox and Lee. And so they had to take Texas. But the Black folks had already made it impossible for white Texans to govern anyway by the time they got there. Because there was a Black army on the west of the Mississippi before the Massachusetts 54th kicking behind, right? They ain't had no shoes and they ain't had no uniform. But they organized themselves. Same thing in the South Carolina First Volunteers. They made us put on red pants so we would look different from them. That's how stupid they are. And we, when they brought Harriet Tubman down to South Carolina, it was to lead these Black folks.
That's right.
So we were fighting for our freedom in Texas. Imagine the biggest network in this country in terms of information was the so-called enslaving network. We knew the damn Civil War ended before Lincoln knew. So to make it like we were ho-hum, we don't know what's up. We knew what was up, but somebody had a gun to our heads saying you better not run. And some chain on our ankles. And despite that, many of us left. The records show thousands of us went to Mexico and was given refuge. Thousands.
That's right.
Within a 10-year period of time.
So
we've always been in a resistance mode, a rebellion mode in Texas. And so Juneteenth evolved on our part as a celebration of that. They tried to change the narrative. Them freeing us. They never freed a damn one of us. As you said,
that's right.
You know, the Emancipation Proclamation, they had no authority in the South. So you're going to free somebody in a state you got no power, no army, and no authority.
You know, it's a great book, Lerone Bennett's book, Forced into Glory.
Oh, yeah. I love that. You remember people turn on LeRon when he wrote that book?
Oh,
yes,
yeah,
they did.
Man, they sure did. That was a powerful, powerful book. You know what else is interesting as we go through all of this around Juneteenth and 4th of July and all of that? Our people got to realize that even in the Revolutionary War, when England wanted to manipulate the enslaved Africans, told them, fight with us.
I think we need to get into that for a little bit.
Fight with us and we'll set you free. So Lincoln said, fight with us and we'll set you free. So they had same pattern.
Yeah.
When in fact, it was and people talk about Harriet Tubman freed the slaves, walked 400, 300. She also was in the Union Army and freed 700 of us, Dr. Molina.
Look, this is one of my favorite things, that their math doesn't math. They said that Mama Harriet freed at least 300 enslaved people. My math says it was at least 1,000 people.
That's right.
Let's take their number. What was it? 19 trips, right? 19 trips she took. That is the trips on foot. But as Dr. Small was talking about, we got the whole Combahee River raid that freed at least 700 people. Right. So my math is 300 plus 700 is 1,000.
That's right.
So at least 1,000. And I love what you're offering. It wasn't just by, running back and forth. And she was a spy. She was a medicine woman. She was armed, right? And then she trained other people to also take their own freedom and to be rebels. So I think that we need to lift that up. And it goes along with what Dr. Small was sharing about we've always taken our own freedom. It's always us to free ourselves. They never gave us anything. Dr. Small, I pray that you also are connected with the Black Lives Matter grassroots Charleston chapter, which have you seen them taking over the slave plantation?
Oh, no, I've been in conversation with them on that issue, but I'm up in New Rochelle, New York, but that's home. So I was down dealing with the brothers and sisters in Columbia about the killing of our baby there. And this Asian dude that we've been doing what we have to do. Thanks to the technology, you don't have to be on the spot to do that work. So I fell in love with you thanks to Oba Tishaka. I hadn't met you, but Oba said, no, you're going to love this lady Small. I never met her. I just read about her. Yeah. So I'm going to call Oba when we get off the phone. So I finally got to meet her. And, that whole methodology of using us to their advantage, they're doing it right now with this foundational Black American stuff and some other stuff. And that if you understand, when people think of intelligence, they think of James Bond. No, intelligence is manipulation of populations, all right, through information gathering of that population and their habits, behaviors, and needs. And then you manipulate that population. They're very good at that. And so we go to this July 4th of July thing. Washington did everything in his friggin' power to keep from putting one gun in the hands of one African. Only when the British had beaten them to the point he had one last stand in New Jersey that he made that decision. They say this in the theaters, when things go bad, they say, go to black. And they went to black. And the Black troops put up a hell of a battle in multiple fronts in that so-called Revolutionary War. We won that war for these crackers.
That's right.
Right? But we were fighting for our own freedom. We weren't fighting for them. We don't even quite understand what the hell they were fighting for. We were fighting to be free and get out of slavery.
That's right.
So many of our people in the British, sending many of us to Trinidad, to Jamaica, to Nova Scotia, and then, of course, to Sierra Leone, while the white Americans put most of us back into slavery after lying that they would give us our freedom for lifting up arms during that period of time. And they put us right back into slavery without a thought, But the 4th of July, it is 4th you lied, and that's exactly what they did, and still lying about it, But Frederick said, power concedes nothing without what?
A demand.
Okay.
Never did.
Never will.
Well. So,
well, we got about 5 minutes left. Both of you can make some closing statements. First of all, I want to thank you so much. We just love the exchange. We got to have you back again. But we're talking about the 4th of July and the real deal about Juneteenth. Dr. Molina?
Sure. So first, I want to say thank you for bringing Obachaka into the space. He was one of my first Black Studies professors before I was in high school. I was in the 9th grade. He used to come and do I went to Berkeley High, and it was the only high school in the country with a Black Studies department. So met him then and have been fortunate to stay in contact ever since. I think as we talk about the 4th of July and the farce of July is what some people also call it, it's really important that I'm seeing all of these advertisements for what is America at 250 years, right? America is what it's always been. It's a country that's built on the stolen land of indigenous people by the stolen labor and lives of our African ancestors. And they are perpetuating a lie when they go throughout the country and say, well, what is it like in Boston, or what is it like in Arizona? They're perpetuating a lie. And so I think that there have been some really, really important conversations between Black and indigenous people about what it means to summon in that spirit of resistance and say, we still do not submit. We still do not submit to our exploitation. We still do not submit to the idea that you can own us or own a land that, you didn't create. This is God's land, right? You can't own the land. There's a beautiful poem about that, right? How can you own the land? How can you own the sky? How can you own the waters? You cannot own these things, right? And so I pray that, the spirit of resistance is renewed within us. And I think that's why, especially the ancestors in my own bloodline, what Juneteenth represents to me is a renewal of our resistance, a renewal of our right to our families. When Dr. Small was saying we did not stay in our present homes and work for wages. We did not. We sought to reunite our families. We sought to discover ourselves and demonstrate what it means to truly be free. We sought to engage in spiritual work that's core to who we are as human and divine beings. And I think that tomorrow and always should be a time of awakening and recommitment to honor, and I've been saying more and more, avenge our ancestors. I got that from Mary Hooks. She always talks about avenging our ancestors, right? That it's really important that we do that, and that we do that work as they're stealing Black life still. Carmelo Anthony and Cyrus Belton, and this new baby that they just killed in Mississippi. We have to avenge that, and we have to demand and take our own freedom.
That's right. Well, I also want to say that we are very, very fond of Obati Shaka. He was our leader in the National Black United Front with Reverend Henry Daughtry.
Right.
I think he headed up the San Francisco chapter. And so, in his books, he wrote some of the first books. We write about the history of civil rights, Black power, but he had a book on the art of leadership, volume 1 and volume 2.
Right. Yeah.
Powerful, powerful books. Not too many African people, Black people, speak on the subject of leadership and not just leadership personalities. Dr. Small, close us.
Sister said it so clearly. I'm a Dessalines, freedom or death. I've always lived by that mantra, freedom or death, all my life. I can't imagine anything else. There's no other probability of being for me. Either I'm going to be free or I'm going to die fighting for that freedom. That's the only choices we have. Our people have demonstrated that throughout the history in this hemisphere. Let nobody ever lie to you or fool you about the resistance, the rebellion, and the death that we've gone through. There's never been a day in our experience in North America when a segment of our population wasn't fighting for freedom. Never. In every location. And those ancestors live in the rest of us.
That's right.
And we think of what we can do next. Resistance, rebellion, or death.
Wow. Well, you know what? I'm going to have both of you back because I had written a piece, but y'all can get into it deeper than I, called We Fought Back.
Absolutely.
And there is a history of rebellions and resistance that a lot of our people don't know about. We weren't happy enslaved Africans. The resistance was powerful. Inez?
Just want to thank you both. You've been exciting, you've been informative, and we know that our audience has gained a lot of information. If you want to give us any kind of contact numbers or emails that people can reach out to, we give you an opportunity now to share that.
Sure. I'm on social media at Doc Melly Mel, and then my organization is Black Lives Matter Grassroots, BLM Grassroots on all social media. And people can email me at melina@blmgrassroots.org. Black Lives Matter Grassroots is 51 chapters around the country. We stand on front lines, not on red carpets.
And for me, it's Professor Small African World. That's come on my Facebook page, or just www.professorsmall.com, and that's my what do you call the thing? You don't even know.
Website.
Thank you for tuning in to Operation Power, and as we say each and every week, the truth shall set you free, and power is the great equalizer. Black power.
Black power.